Welcome to the Elbows Down MotoGP podcast. This is a special episode. We've waited quite a while to do this. We're joined, as always, by Alex,
Yes.
co-host, and we are joined by British champion and ex-Grand Prix racer Keith Huewen. How are you, Keith?
I'm good, really good, apart from the fact it's wet and cold.
Yes. Yeah,
it is up north as well.
I'm bloody tired of it, honestly.
Yes, we all are.
I'm in my 30s now, and every year I get more grumpy about the cold. I know you love...
Imagine what it's like for me.
I always bang on that I do love winter, but I have been ill for all of winter, so I'm sick of it now, and
I'm fed up with it, honestly.
Before we kick off, very quickly, Jimmy and I have a very exciting announcement to make, don't we?
You're getting married.
We're going to Brno.
Yeah, nice one, Keith. But yeah. We've thought about it. We've had a word with our missus. Yeah, no, we've bought our tickets for Brno this year, so that should be a good one, folks. If we've already said it before, but it is. I mean, you could say maybe after or before. You've been as well, Keith. Obviously, Assen. Would you class it as good as Assen?
Yeah, I think I would. I mean, the modern day Assen, yeah, not the old day Assen. There's several Assens. I mean, the original Assen was awesome. The one with the Mickey Mouse right-hand turn halfway down the front straight nowadays is not quite as good. But yeah, Brno's a pretty trick place to be. There's so many of them, really, when you think about it. Classic racetracks to go and see. There's definitely some bucket lists in MotoGP track-wise.
There is. Well, me and you were always talking on Twitter about how amazing Mugello is. It's probably the best race to go to, unless you can get to Phillip Island, which is some people say is better as a spectacle. And weather-wise, I think Mugello is probably better.
Mugello was well, you say that, but Saturday at Mugello, and I always bang on about this on our episodes, is that when we went to Mugello last time, which was 2022, obviously we had the really really hot Friday, really wet, intermittent sort of changing conditions on Saturday, which gave us the weirdest grid. Definitely the weirdest front row. That we've ever seen.
It's rare to see it, though, isn't it? That weather. But yeah, we had Didier on pole, and that was crazy.
Didier on pole, Marini, and was it Bez as well?
Yeah, because both of the R46 boys on the front row, so that was a bizarre thing. But yeah, I mean, Mugello is one of those tracks because it's so fast and flowing. I mean, the last couple of years we haven't seen barnstorming finishes, have we? But a lot of the time you do, because fast tracks make great racing. They always have. Brno is one of those. So yeah, we should be picking different races, but I've been to Brno once before. I've been to Mugello before, but it's hard to not go again. I mean, I think Cormac, the photographer, always says, just go to Assen. Go to Assen if you want some, it's not too expensive to get there, and the atmosphere is amazing.
I think we could probably manage it as well this year, but not going to promise on that. What we will be doing though, what we will be doing is we will be doing an episode very soon about how we're getting to Brno. We're doing our punter's perspective sort of stuff. We're going to do a pre and post punter's perspective. So how we're going to get to Brno, what we're going to be doing where, and all that sort of stuff. So that'll be coming up in the next few weeks or so.
A little bit of us news there. But, so speaking of tracks, and I guess your favourite bikes, Keith. If you had in your racing career, a moment on a bike, a track, what is your fondest memory? What's the first memory that comes to your mind? Oh, it didn't get better than that. It just didn't get better than that was the one. What would that be?
It's funny, and eras are difficult things to match up against. It's like a TZ750 comes to mind with the Northwest 200 because it's the fastest I've ever been on a straight line with a motorbike in that era. So TZ750, Northwest 200. Took away the trophy, First time I'd ever been there, never went back again, took all the money, kissed the girls, and that was the end. Got pissed, and that was the end of that. But 500s, really, the 1983 RG 500 that I had, it was only a production bike. It was 20 mile an hour slower than the factory bikes, but it was a real good bike to ride, a real good bike to set up. You got to remember, back in the day, you were pouncing about with things like carburation and stuff like that, and you were working stuff out for yourself. There wasn't any of this downloading business. You didn't have to worry about any of that. You would sort of 3 clicks on the compression, a couple of clicks on the rebound damping, whatever it might have been, and a bit of weight shift here and there, and putting in different gearboxes to make it work, so you kept it right within the 2,500 RPM that worked. Outside of that, really, you didn't have much else to play with it. Ain't like it is now, where you can drive them like a car. Anybody could ride a MotoGP bike nowadays. Anybody could ride a MotoGP bike nowadays. You can ride a bike, you can ride a MotoGP bike because they're so mild. until you get to the business end, obviously.
Yeah,
They're the kind of thing that they're going to kill you if you don't know what you're doing and you're trying to use all of the horsepower. But basically, if you want to ride the thing, you could ride a MotoGP bike quite gently. Whereas take a 500 back in the day, a two-stroke, like the clutch to the power band, and the power band got the better of you, and the concrete-ridden tires bloody didn't grip on the floor because they were cold and they were no good anyway, and it spit you to the moon. So it's always amusing when you get modern day riders that go out and try an old 500, which horsepower wise are nothing in comparison. They're like shopping bikes compared with what these bikes chuck out nowadays, but they were very, very difficult to ride to the limit.
I mean, we've got a couple of the MotoGP games, and you can go back and you can play on 800s, or you can play on 500s and that sort of thing. And the 500s they're just impossible, aren't they?
To try,
especially if you've got all your settings on realistic. It's really bloody hard.
You can actually turn Keith's commentary on that.
Well, the trouble is, the trouble is, it's the way it was. There was no traction control and so on and so forth. You didn't have any of those rider aids that you've got now. Yeah. I'm not saying for a second that racing in MotoGP is I think it's harder now in MotoGP than it's ever been. The competition is stronger. The disparity between each manufacturer is miles closer than it's ever been. All those guys are absolute superstars that are riding them. They're athletes as well. You've got to remember, half of our lot were pissheads. It wasn't, Grand Prix was in between parties and smoking and drinking. When I look back, it was more like club racing.
His helmet, for example. Oh, not his, his lid. The fact that he had a bloody a hole cut in his chin so that he could smoke on the grid. It's fantastic.
Well, you used to have to do that. When I went to the Northwest 200, we had some brand new flip-flop. Oh, I remember flip-flop paint. When you turned your head, it changed colour. But we had to drill the front because at the end of the straight down into Port Rush, you'd been so long, going so quick for so long, you'd got a vacuum that had built up and you had no breath left. When you went to hit the brakes, you were almost on the point of passing out. So I had to drill a hole in the front so I could get your lips like that, so I could get some air. It was like a ram air system. It wasn't, well, even though I did smoke then, it wasn't for smoking purposes.
Yeah. Oh, amazing. Well, speaking about obviously nowadays compared to back in your era, Keith, when you were riding, obviously we get a lot of people now that are saying, oh, well, it used to be so much better when it wasn't all Ducati's winning it. Racing used to be closer. There used to be more battles. But obviously you remember an era where, people were winning races by 40 seconds sometimes.
Yeah, and lapping half the field. I mean, the racing is miles better now. I think we're in the best era we've ever been in. That's my personal opinion. I understand what some people are saying about the good old. I hate that phrase, the good old days. To start with, it dates everything, which makes it terrible. Youngsters, they're watching MotoGP, Moto2, Moto3, three usually great races. I mean, Moto2's picked up the pace in the last year or so as well, which is great to see since Triumph have been on the game. But I think that the racing we're getting is the aero thing is messing around a little bit with MotoGP at the minute, and the ride height adjusters and all the rest of it. Although I have to say, I think that the starts are spectacular. I mean, that's what you always wanted was a spectacular start when you were racing.
As a spectacle, yeah. I mean, it's incredible. We always know that we're going to get some kind of action in the first few corners, and when you're trying to introduce a friend or whatever to MotoGP, that the first few laps are going to be brutal. There's going to be something exciting for people that have never watched MotoGP, or people that watch modern F1, where not very much not very much happens. That they're going to see something that is probably going to make them think, oh, hang on a minute, I could get into this.
I think that it's a problem that we have. It's a cultural problem we have, is why we don't have as many. I mean, it's a strange situation, isn't it? I mean, when you think of the quality we have across the board in motorbike racing at the moment, you would think that it would be something that would be generating a fair old bit of cash for teams, for youngsters coming through, for to make it work diversity wise with girl racers and the like, which there are a few out there. The reason why we haven't got any really good girl racers or more of them is because the pond's small. It's full of blokes. There isn't a pond full of delightful young ladies that want to go racing motorbikes. So I'm scratching my head around here at the moment. The only person in my household has decided that they want a bike. Bearing in mind I've got all girls. She's decided that she's going the bike way now. So I've got that panic that all dads have over their kids going on road bikes. But
yeah.
You were saying about those starts.
Yes.
I mean, yeah, the starts are dangerous and everything. I think top GP journal you know very well, Matt Oxley was saying, and he hit the nail on the head. You watch those practice starts at Sepang on day 3, and I watched that video 10 times over, Keith. Watching them over and over again, and because I think I'm obsessed with the noise of GP engines. And there's launch devices. It's spectacular to watch, and you think actually on TV though, it's just that's dangerous, and it turns it into a dragster. Or do we don't really need that? I mean, the wings to a degree I'd like to keep because they need to be special. They're prototypes, but the ride height devices are dangerous and expensive. But then you watch that, you think, oh, so bloody cool.
Yeah, but I mean, but at the end of the day, I mean, like you've got to look at the teams. The teams are interpreting the rule book. The rule book is written by the teams, effectively. It is the teams. The MSMA they make the rules. It's only interpreted and only sanctioned by IRTA and Dorna. You know, at the end of the day, the team has to, and it's a unanimous situation where everybody has to agree. That's why they couldn't get rid of the aero that Ducati brought on and so on and so forth. Because Delinea, when he came across to the Ducati team, had got other things worked out. So the only way that it can be altered is when there's that natural break, which I think is 27, when we're going to get some major rule changes technically, or if Dorna and IRTA sanction it as a safety issue. So it's all very well Matt Oxley beating his drum as he always does. I love Matt. He's great, providing you don't have to listen to his politics or some of the other things left of field. And very left of field in his case. But the point being is that you ain't going to be able to make those changes just yet. They're not going to happen. The manufacturers haven't ruled it as a safety problem, even though some people are saying it's bordering on a safety issue because of the ride height devices. If Dorna or IRTA had decided that was a safety issue, they would put it to the MSMA and something would have to be done about it. As it is at the minute, I think the aero is the biggest worry for me. Ride height adjustment is out the window come 27. We ain't going to see that anymore. We go back to something that looks normal, even though I think we all agree from the start, especially watching it in practice, it does look bloody good. I mean, if you want to go and see a bit more of it, go to Santa Pod. They're all laying on their bellies down there.
I mean, we're definitely noticing something changing with the aero coming up this year. I mean, you look at the rear seat unit of Hondas, for example. Obviously, when Ducati were the first ones to put the rear aero on the bike,
Stegosaurus
wings, that sort of thing. The only manufacturer that we've seen testing with the Stegosaurus wings on the back consistently throughout testing has been a Yamaha. But yeah, I mean, maybe a lot of the manufacturers have realised that it's not working.
It's not that it's working; it's keeping up. And the problem is, it's bloody expensive to keep up. And when you got KTM who are bankrupt, effectively, they brought in administrators to run the whole shebang. I mean, KTM are in massive trouble, and to keep up with someone like Ducati, who are chucking quite a lot of money at it, the fact is it costs money to go into aero all of the time. Formula One, the reason I see so much aero on Formula One is because they've got such massive budgets. But even they have to keep within a cost cap.
There's more restrictions in Formula One aero now than there is MotoGP now. I mean, which is bonkers when you think about it. And that's just the way it has been. I mean, I think you've said before, Keith, I don't think 2027 is early enough because by that point, Ducati especially are going to be able to optimize everything with the aerodynamic boxes that are shortened and narrower again.
I have a slight disagreement with you on that one because I think Ducati have hit the mark early, and I think everybody else had a massive catch up to do. Honda were miles at sea when it came to things like aero. They hadn't gone anywhere with it. Yamaha. Likewise, to some extent. I mean, it seems strange, doesn't it? We're talking about Honda and Yamaha being so far behind, but I mean, you only got to look at the test that we've had. Yamaha are quite close to the mark at the moment. They're getting somewhere thereabouts. So whatever they've found combination-wise is definitely beginning to work for them. And I think maybe Ducati have already got to the peak, perhaps.
But yeah, I mean, it's amazing what Yamaha have managed to do. And Fabio Quartararo said it himself. He said, usually 2022, 2023, 2024 testing, we were looking at 3 tenths of a second faster, 3 seconds faster, that'd be incredible. 3 tenths of a second faster every year.
Yeah.
This year, we're 6 tenths faster. And what they're doing is incredible. But and the fact that you've now got one Yamaha in the sub 157s is just
incredible. It's only one, but it's a start, isn't it? I mean, with Alex Rins hobbling,
and
Sepang's a difficult one as well. I mean, Sepang, unless you go to Sepang to the test, you can't appreciate that it can be like you can have thunderstorms in the afternoon, which is normal at that part of the world at that time of the day. It can be humid as hell. It's a strange test. It depends how dirty the track was when they got to it, whether they had loads of bloody customer Ferraris riding around there or doing whatever they're doing. It's probably not the best indicator. I'm looking more to Buriram, the test there, to see what's going on. And of course, we're all in Buriram, including me. Social occasion. We're over there for the full-on job. I can't wait. Looking forward to it.
Amazing. Are you in a paddock as well, doing a bit of that, or just?
No, I mean, I'm going to be in a paddock, obviously, because that's where your mates are. But it's more of a. I mean, it's second home for me anyway, Thailand. So kind of it fits with me quite well. But Buriram is not a place that I know that well. It's in the centre of the country. We don't usually spend much time there. But this Grand Prix will be massive. I mean, we've had the big launch in Bangkok. The most boring 2 hours I've ever watched in my life, but anyway. It was done Thai style. You've got to remember, Thai style is quite different. Their stage presentation, their presenters, I'm sure that guy, when I first saw that picture, when it zoomed in on the stage with the bikes around it, I could have sworn it was a Thai JT, a Thai James Toseland. It looked like when he started talking in Thai, I thought, bloody hell, JT's learned Thai.
It was really funny. We might as well talk about the presentation that they had. I watched it as well. I was at work at the time, and I was just sort of had it on in the background. One of the things that really made me cringe then laugh was when Marc Marquez was running down the line of fans high-fiving them all. It was crazy. It was amazing to see how crazy those fans are. I mean, wow. But the guy that was sort of hosting the whole thing, I can't remember his name, but he said, "Oh, this is the 6 times MotoGP world champion Alex Marquez."
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, he's just Freudian slip or something. And then he said it again about five minutes later. I was like, oh, surely not. No.
Oh, bless him. I mean, both those guys. One looked like the guy that was a Gangnam style bloody.
Yeah. That's all number 2. Yeah, that was Gangnam style guy.
And they both got their pads in front of them to remember who was who and what was what. I mean, I think Lucio Cecchinello, they managed to murder his name at one particular point. There was just.
Oh, and Enya Bastianini.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say that it was good effort. The Thais throw everything into it, and they're massively enthusiastic. And the fact that Somkiat Chantra, on a MotoGP bike is going to mean that it's going to be mad in Buriram. I mean, it always is anyway. I mean, it is one of those events to go to. There are certain events that you've got to go to because of the kind of atmosphere around it. And that one, Argentina, I always used to like Termas de Rio Hondo when we were up there. That's in the town of Termas. It's just nuts. Le Mans is nuts, but kind of, well, I don't know how I describe Le Mans. Very French, and burning fences and burning cars, and generally, but the Argentinian version is miles better in my view. But then again, it's a long way to go for a little bit of atmosphere, I suppose.
Yeah, well, this is the thing is, obviously we look at Le Mans. Obviously, your dad and Jimmy's dad and Jimmy's uncle went to Le Mans last year, didn't they?
Yeah, I would have gone with them, but obviously
they didn't camp or anything because they're both of an advanced stage, and they're not going to want to go camping with people with flamethrowers and
R6s with megaphones and whatnot. Yeah.
But they said it was absolutely fantastic, and the grandstands were just electric.
I think that everybody around the world could learn from the French promotion. The promoter there does an absolutely fantastic job,
Genius.
year after year.
Yeah, well, when they have the after the podium celebrations and stuff, and then you can just hear just watching the live feed, you can just hear what the DJ is doing, and he's just got the crowd like one putty in his hand. It's amazing.
It's, a bit different from the Silverstone one, isn't it? Yeah, but as you were saying, Keith, the promoter is a genius. Yes, I guess you could say that they've got a bit of an advantage with Fabio having a superstar world champion from a few years ago.
And Zarco.
Yeah. It's so, I mean, that's not to say. I mean, that brings. I'll tell you what, we can bring that on to this question. To be fair, because that's a bit of a home advantage. We don't have anyone in MotoGP from a British perspective, and we probably haven't got one for a couple of years now. But the question was, we keep blaming pay TV for the lack of, for the MotoGP problems in the UK, viewing-wise, don't we?
Yeah.
Silverstone attendance-wise, and we've gone down that rabbit hole a few times. But when you look at the majority of the viewing in World Superbike's heyday, Sky Sports was pay TV back in the 90s. Didn't matter because Carl Fogarty was winning. Obviously, your producer, you and Jules, was so good. He was able to. That helped, but it's not like TNT are bad. It's just lacking a brick. Do you think that's why? Because the pay TV thing is in the way, but it was pay TV back in Sky Sports, and then you had 125,000 people at Brands Hatch. So I don't think we can directly blame pay TV in that regard. What do you think?
I think that there's not enough people putting enough effort in it in our hierarchy here. I think Silverstone are up their own backsides. I think everybody is disclaiming responsibility. Dorna don't make the kind of effort they should make here in the UK, although they do put a lot of money into British riders. We wouldn't have any British riders if it wasn't for fact for Dorna. They pay for Jeremy McWilliams. If you go back in the day, they put money in for various riders going forwards. Jake Dixon wouldn't be in anywhere if Dorna hadn't paid money through IRTA to sponsor Jake Dixon to get him a ride. So Dorna have done bits and pieces, but I think everybody seems to absolve themselves from absolute responsibility for it. Like Silverstone seem to look towards Dorna for bigger promotion. Dorna look towards Silverstone for it. MSVR don't do anything at all towards it, even though they pay lip service to it. I mean, Johnny Palmer. I think Jonathan Palmer's done a fantastic job with our racetracks in the UK, but he hasn't done the sport that much good in as much as that there's no money. You only have to look in the back of the trucks. There's nothing in the back of the trucks. It's what we would say in the old days: fur coat, no knickers. You can't afford the underwear. You can only have the coat on the outside, and that's a bit how it looks in BSB is by far and away a great product, really good product, but somewhere we're missing a massive trick in this country. When our riders have to go to Spain or go to Italy or wherever they have to go to have a career, and their parents have to, and the other thing with motorbike races, mostly our parents aren't that bloody wealthy, to be able to, to look after Lord Fauntleroy or little boy Fauntleroy and send him off in his Formula 3 car to promote him through to Formula 1 or something. Most of with the exception of maybe Johnny Herbert from memory, most guys in Formula 1 have had a little bit of money or people with backgrounds that move them forward. I mean, even Lewis Hamilton, his dad, he put everything into it. I mean, they absolutely committed and found him McLaren. If you go back to Ron, whatever his name was, that was running McLaren back in the day, and he had Champions of the Future, and they looked after Lewis as well. They seem to find money, I think is what I'm saying, much easier than anything to do with motorbikes. Like it just does not seem to make or bring forth any kind of cash backing. I'm hoping that Liberty, on a more positive note, sorry for being so negative, on a more positive note, I'm hoping Liberty will see the wood for the trees and see where their marketplaces are and recognise what's going on here. I think we're in for a bit of a sea change here. I can't, by the attitude of the way things are going at Silverstone, I can't see Silverstone keeping the Grand Prix. Although Jonathan Palmer, who has the long lease on Donington Park, I can't see him paying anything like the money to have a Grand Prix there, because it's got to make sense for Jonathan. JP's always about the cash. It's got to make sense for him. But if Silverstone carry on the way they're going, no Day of Champions, no motorcycle track days. The whole thing has seemingly come apart at Silverstone to a great extent. They've made good efforts with the bands and stuff like that, and tried to make an effort, but it never seems to quite work. It just doesn't feel quite right at Silverstone.
But nothing says to me, I don't understand motorbike racing, like moving the Grand Prix to the weekend, the same weekend as the Isle of Man TT. But nothing says, in Stuart Pringle, nothing says, I don't understand, I don't care for motorbike racing like that.
I think Stuart Pringle is managing director of Silverstone, but Stuart Pringle, he rides a bike. He's a very, very personal man. I think he's a consummate professional in what he does. I've got a lot of respect for Stuart Pringle, but at the end of the day, he's got a board of directors. He's got people that he has to, and all the money, all their cash comes from Formula One. The BRDC, it's the British Racing Drivers Club. BRDC owns Silverstone. That's what their major interest is. Now, there are some people within the BRDC that are very pro motorcycle, and that I have no doubt. I mean, they're not all the same, but it kind of just, it sort of like pops up on the calendar once a year for them, and they'll go, "Oh, it's the bikes this week." It's kind of like, it doesn't feel like a coordinated effort throughout the year. As you said earlier on before we came on here, I live in Northampton. We get zero in the way of any kind of promotion here in Northampton. Now, it might be that they've done some kind of demographic bloody study or something for Milton Keynes, Northampton, all the local Luton, all the places that are close by, and worked out that it wouldn't be worth £1 in Northampton. It wouldn't get us one more bloody spectator. But I think it would. I mean, there's a brand new market square in Northampton. Collaborate with West Northampton Council who own it. Let's have a few bikes revving up in the middle of there a couple of nights before, like we've just seen in Bangkok. There are things you can do that are relatively cheap. They revved up a few factory bikes on the stage, but the bikes they turned up on were just painted road bikes. At the end of the day, you could do that all day long. You could have and it doesn't make sense that we had a thing that my daughter went on the other day called the Chilly Willy, and it was because it's freezing bloody cold. They had 800 bikes there last year, 600 I think it was this year, as a ride out in the frost. I mean, if you can gather that kind of enthusiasm for something like a one afternoon rally, there's got to be a better way, and we don't seem to be doing it for the British Grand Prix.
But imagine having just Jake Dixon riding through Northampton on a Moto2 bike. It'd be fantastic, or something along those lines. Scott Ogden.
The thing, you're right. The thing is, though, I mean, imagine if the attendance would be so low, because in the UK there's not enough people bothered. But because that goes back to the lack of marketing for the event.
Yeah.
Which makes no sense, because they're making enough money off F1. You don't need to sell F1 anymore in the UK. It's absolutely already sold. And it sells out. So spend the money on promoting the MotoGP.
They've taken all of the track day time that used to be there. That's all been taken away because they wanted a track day. They can sell it for more money. The kart track that's being built there. Stuart Pringle, again, if we mention Stuart, I always throw him under the bus, bless him. And he don't deserve it, really, because he does try reasonably hard, Stuart. And I think it's genuine. I don't think it's just bullshit, but make your own minds up about that. But I remember quizzing him about the new track and said, what about, are we going to be having mini bikes and so on and so forth? And he said, and it kind of was one of them things like he had, it seemed like he almost hadn't thought about it until it was mentioned. But it should be at the front of your mind. How can we promote young British racers? They had a thing up at Silverstone a few years ago that was in collaboration with Renault. It was a Renault free day, something like that. There used to be the Formula Renault series, which is a car series in the, I think it's in Europe, not just in the UK. And they had 2 or 3 free days over the weekend for this Formula Renault thing, where all you had to do was go into your Renault dealership and get some tickets. So it was a dealer type thing, and they had something like 100,000 plus people every day that were there, and you just think to yourself, how much happier would everybody that was working at Silverstone be if it was a great event? Like all the concessions, I know they're flogging burgers at twice the price they should be, but the reason they are is because they've had to pay Silverstone a load of money to have their concession on the site to start with. And there seems to be this disparity that no one can get over at the moment, the cost of the thing and how much it costs for us to go in there and how much atmosphere there is there. And that's a shame.
Massive shame. I'm getting quite. I mean, I am going again this year. I said I wasn't going to go. I'm going to go with some mates, just for the sake of this podcast. And I like to go. I almost feel like I should go. Because just out of respect for the sport. Like, if we don't turn up, no one will be there. Because I mean, I can't remember who said it, but we're bang on about saying it's the same people there every year, and they're right.
It is.
Randoms that I saw the last 2 years.
Yeah.
You just think I shouldn't be able to recognise random people.
I think the problem is as well, when we have the privilege of doing the stage thing, all of us lot, at some stage or another, you're up on the stage doing whatever it is, and you look across, and it's not that you can recognise the faces because I can't see as far as I could before, but the point being is they're all flat caps and grey hair or no hair, and there's a few kids in the front of the row, but what happens when, my question always is what happens when that lot roll over? What happens when that lot don't go to any more meetings? What happens when they come to an end?
Well, surely attendance at Silverstone can't drop anymore, but yeah, that's what's going to happen, isn't it?
Well, the thing is, what you should be doing is, blue light should be going for free. Anybody that's, any of the major services, let them in for free. Schools should be doing a tour of the school, should be getting schools in there. I mean, kids should be going to Silverstone on museum days or whatever it is. I mean, it's something that I think that should be encouraged around. You need the kids early on, even if they're not going to race motorbikes. They need to come and see what a great thing it is, how cool it is. It's not cool anymore. It used to be quite cool once upon a time.
You know what? Even in my work, because obviously I sell showies and leathers daily, and a lot of you'll have someone come in and maybe he's getting a helmet and the missus is getting a helmet, and they'll come in and they're wearing F1 merch. And it happens quite often, and I think that's fine, cool, great. We all like motorsport in general, but I just think, and it happens almost as much, sometimes more, some weeks than bike merch. And I think, and the kids just talk about F1, and I think we're not passing it down unless they don't want to or just not bothered. But it wasn't like that in the 80s, 90s, certainly the 70s, when everything would sell out. It was more of a, names like yourself and Barry or Mike Howell, all household names. It just isn't like that anymore. I mean,
I think the problem is that when I say we're in an Instagram society nowadays, we're moving through that transition of social media and so on and so forth, the way people consume our sports generally, whatever sport it is. And I think the problem is that we've not moved with that time. I was really, really pleased to see some of the stuff that was getting out from Bangkok at the weekend, of some of the lads dressed like like David Beckham. Now, this is going to sound really odd coming from me because I am totally not a football person, but I just think David Beckham is untouchable. I think he looks right. He's got a bit of a squeaky voice, but he sounds right. He doesn't do any harm for his sport at all. He only does good. Some of the adverts you see him in are brilliant as well. If we go back to the Sheen and Henry Cooper days, of course, if you want adverts, splash it all over then Henry. They were around back in the day, but I just think that we saw some of our lads this week in Bangkok, rooftop bars looking out across the city, even though the clouds were quite low. But it showed them in a much more kind of Instagram light. Now, there are going to be people watching this that are going to be, their toes are going to be curling up while I'm saying that, because they're just going to think I'm like the Antichrist saying that kind of stuff. But the fact of the matter is we are always going to go to race meetings, always going to watch meetings, always going to support motorbike racing. We are always going to do that. There's nothing that's ever going to part us from that. But we're not bringing in the next generations of people that might see it in a different light. Influencers get on my tits like you can't believe, because I just think they're awful. I mean, but it is a way in for youngsters that suddenly look and see this action. You don't hardly ever see nowadays decent music pieces that go with bike race action. Back in the day of Sky, a fellow called Martin Turner, who was our producer, Rory Hopkins, who was his assistant producer back in the day, and a raft of really talented kids that were underneath them that used to bring beautiful music pieces and coordinated stuff that used to fill all the gaps everywhere you looked. Or if you were about to go to a graphic, there'd be a great music piece underneath it, rolling underneath it. I tell you what, I'm talking about it, and the hairs are standing up on my arms now while I'm talking about
I know
it.
exactly what you mean.
Because I remember it like that. You can always associate a music piece with the old Eurosport, when Eurosport was in London before it went to bloody France, and then the Sky version of that, if you like, that came out in what, 92, I think it was, which is, you mentioned earlier, the foggy days, World Superbike days, when we all got hold of it. But there was a raft of people and editors that were putting together really good, snappy music pieces that used to go out everywhere. I remember saying to the guys at BT, who weren't really that interested, to be honest. I mean, BT was a strange company to start with, because BT was the broadcaster. They were the guys that broadcast the stuff, but it was made by a company called North One, who obviously have budgets and personnel and issues that they've got to have, because they're an outside production company making it for the likes of BT. But no one was really interested in any of them whiz bang wallop type music pieces and stuff that went out. Sky used to fill a segue between programs with a 2 or 3 minute music piece with bikes in it.
After this, I've got something to show Alec. You try to remember, Keith. So 1999 Superbikes, World Superbike season, one of the biggest, most watched seasons probably. Foggy's last year. Brands Hatch, and on the coverage, you go back. Let's look at the year. Let's look at the year till now, right? And it was a highlights reel with awesome music. Like you've got like Massive Attack, you've got. But really like thumpy music, and obviously that was a build up through the old split in the Nürburgring and the Monza last lap with Edwards and Foggy over the line. Awesome. All the music as well was brilliant. It was almost like a mini version of the Drive to Survive thing.
Absolutely. You've hit the nail on the head. That's exactly what it was. And the reason for that was that Sky Television, they were a company that was not particularly well thought of because of the amount of money that you had to pay to get it. But the fact was that they gave freelance to their staff to get on with it. And they were staff. They weren't freelancers. Most of the guys that worked in BT are freelancers. So they're kind of, it's almost, the culture is not there to push the boundaries, because if you come up with an idea and you're trying to force that through on a producer or on a director that doesn't want to go in that direction, then you're suddenly making waves. It was all about keeping it smooth at BT. You weren't allowed to sort of have peaks and troughs. You weren't allowed to have that sort of personality and that push for something different. And if you did, and there was somebody that didn't like it, the chances are, because you might have been a freelancer, you might not have got the gig next time round or the next race meeting or something along those lines. So very difficult and changing environment for broadcasters. But the biggest issue always is money. Sky Sports back in the day threw money at it. You'd have 2 or 3 editors working during your week on pieces to go into your weekend. They would be there, dedicate you. You go to the edit suite, you go, I've got this idea. What do you think? And they back time a bit of music to it and all the rest of it. And their enthusiasm was fantastic. You'd walk into an edit suite and it wouldn't be off. Here he comes again with a bloody another stupid idea. Because we were all pain in the arse in those days. We didn't know anything about television. We didn't know anything about how much it cost. We didn't know how much effort it was to make a really good promo piece that lasted 30 seconds and took 2 days to make. It took an edit suite, which is expensive, plus editors that are expensive, to make a 30-second piece. And but Sky used to spend the money.
I always think of it like, you look at the old introductions to MotoGP and all that sort of stuff. Even the games, which I first got into MotoGP in 2001.
Yeah.
Sorry, it was 2001.
Have another beer.
My dad had bought me. My dad had bought me he brought it back from a conference he was doing. It was the original Xbox, because my dad used to build stages for Microsoft and that sort of thing, and so he'd been on the launch tour for the original Xbox. Brought me back a display Xbox and a couple of games. I was like, this is incredible. One of those games was the first ever MotoGP game, and I can still hear it in my head. the title music to that game. Every time you booted it up, you'd have the same music, and it'd be absolutely fantastic. And it'd be, Rossi and all that lot, racing in a sort of like animated form with this cracking sort of rocky music behind it. And And I always now when I walk anywhere, when I get the bus anywhere, and I have a certain song in my head, you can almost picture bikes going around the track, action shots of bikes going around the track to that sort of song. Now we've got this sort of weird gladiator style introduction.
Oh, for the theme tune,
where the theme tune for MotoGP.
I don't mind it personally, but I know what you mean.
I don't know, but I think it's a bit crap because it's a bit cringy. There's not really any action shots of the bike.
Well, I think where you're going with that, if I might interrupt you with that, I think where we're going with that is that there are certain times in your life where music peaks. Like and we had a crew of people that could hit the not the chart, but the vibe absolutely spot on at Sky back in the day. Utah Saints comes to mind straight away. Utah Saints. I used to love that when they fired that in over so many different things. And I think that when trance was in, end of the 90s, beginning of 2000s, you used to get, trance that was rolling underneath different stuff, Tiesto or whoever it might have been. And kind of it was an era of music that suited the sport as well at the time. And of course, people of that age at that time, it's a connection that you make with something. And I think that comes back to what I was saying earlier on. We are missing a connection with the younger guys that are coming through. Like I say, the Instagram thing and so on, the social media side of thing, I think is a pain in the ass, but I'm as old as I am, and that's the reason why I do. But a lot of kids, that will bring them in. It will slowly but sure. Lewis Hamilton, when somebody said Lewis Hamilton is looking at perhaps investing in a team, you got the old boys that were saying, "Oh, no, I don't want it to be like Formula Liberty. Don't want it to be like Formula One." Well, no, we don't want it to be like Formula One, but we want it to be at least as popular as Formula One and across a wider audience. And I think that getting someone of Lewis Hamilton's ilk, who, let's face it, he ticks a few boxes, doesn't he? I mean, Formula One world champion, black, English, a superstar, style guru, although you wouldn't catch me dressing in anything he dresses in, not even when I'm dead. But at the end of the day, he is iconic. I mentioned Beckham earlier on, iconic, and we're kind of missing those icons at the minute that we would have. Sheen, probably the last. Yeah, I mean, like you mentioned Hailwood before, but he was more of the older style, kind of wealthy gentleman background and so on and so forth. Sheen was not so. I mean, Frank and Iris didn't have much money until Barry started winning it all. We're missing that kind of hook. We don't have a hook anymore in this country. It's just all us old boys going motorbike racing because we really, really like it and always have done. But the link to the next sets of generations needs sorting out. And I believe Liberty will jump on that.
We'll have to. And then we need a ride to survive, because if we don't, then we're relying purely on reinventing ourselves with social media. Another thing that they need to do is they're finally starting to lift restrictions on putting footage on social media. It's starting to finally be, because it used to be that if you did it on YouTube or Instagram or whatever, or Twitter, it'd be taken off straight away. F1 have relaxed those, and because they realise it just promotes the sport. You can't get taken off if you put a full race on, obviously.
Well, they got rid of Bernie. I mean, Bernie was anti-social media. So, Bernie Ecclestone was anti-social media. So basically, when Bernie rolled over, Liberty came in, and of course they did relax then, and that will happen again. Dorna are protecting their rights. It's a geo blockage as well. I mean, the trouble is with it's the Wild West, isn't it, on the internet, because something that's okay in one country might not be in another country, rights wise or whatever it is. So you've got these rights issues that have been sold, and basically different marketplaces have different rules in place for what's allowed to be shown and what's not. So I'm sure Liberty will pull all those threads together. And with the new rules and stuff in 27, the problem is the Liberty deal is taking so long because the bloody EU is so incredibly long-winded in everything to do with this. And the EU have put them through another phase of aggravation and more hoops to jump through. So we're not going to really have Liberty on board until the end of 25. And then we're a year before we have the new rules and stuff that are in place. So,
problem, isn't it?
Yeah. We've got a few questions. We've got quite a few questions to go, so we'll try and get through a few, because as I thought, we wanted to rumble a bit because it's fun to do that. But I'll try and get through some of these. Linked to what we were saying a minute ago, though, it goes off nicely. Obviously, we saw the launch event. We just touched on that a few times, and I couldn't believe the reception Mark got when he ran down, giving everyone a high five in his full leathers. And it reminded me of almost the reception that the Beatles would get in the '60s in the UK. I just think it's insanely popular in the Far East, and I think are we almost at a stage now where it almost doesn't need selling there?
Well, the fact of the matter is I think you're overlooking a bit there, Jim. I think that you're overlooking the fact that Marc Marquez and Honda have done a fantastic PR job in the Far East and
Yeah.
Southeast Asia. They have gone. Those marketplaces are hugely motorcycle orientated, small bikes mostly, of course, but huge. The hot side of the world is very pro motorbike, and Honda, Marc Marquez have done a massive effort out there, and I think that he is very popular in places like Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia.
But what I mean is, if that because it is that popular, and he's him and Valentino have probably been the sharp end of the reason why. But it's less difficult because of the two-wheel thing. They're very bikey countries. It's brilliant. But because of
I'm going to interrupt you again because I'm one of them horrible commentators that do this kind of thing. You mentioned earlier on about Britain do not have perhaps somebody at the sharp end of MotoGP at the moment since Cal rolled over. Great shame, but since Cal rolled over, we've not got anybody there. But if you look at Thailand, they ain't got anybody at the sharp end. They've only just got Somkiat in, and he doesn't stand much of a chance on a Honda, I don't think. I mean, it'd be fantastic if he does, and I wish him well. But the point being is that they don't either, and they still get 200,000 people at the track. The fact is because it is promoted and it's a young vibe. They've got the feel for it.
very young.
That's my point.
You should not think it's also because it's bikey, the country.
Yeah, I mean, you think about a lot of Southeast Asia and the fact that a lot of those countries haven't really started getting cars for a long time. I mean, you think about
they want to be seen at an event like that. Yeah. We as a country do not want to be seen at a MotoGP race, particularly. We do, but the upcoming youngsters in Thailand, in Indonesia, in all those places, they want to be seen at the track. To them, this is the Instagram opportunity. This is the biggest thing that they're probably going to go to. And it's affordable. That's the other thing. Malaysia, the cost of getting in is reasonable. I think Thailand shot themselves in the foot one year with that, but I think they've sorted it out now. But it's cool.
The whole thing at the one Bangkok place that was all free. Their race weekends are probably a lot cheaper than ours, and it's a fantastic vibe. But what I'm saying about motorbikes in those countries is that they haven't had cars for so long. It's only a very recent thing in the last 30 years, where they're getting cars in. And so the cars there are extremely expensive because they haven't had time to get cheap. So it's
I mean, that's why I was saying I think we need to keep improving there because you're never going to be perfect. It's massive there, but also because it's so good. It's not like Dorna aren't trying to improve in the West, is it? But we really need to focus on that now because it's already selling itself in Southeast Asia.
The funny thing for me was, like when those guys got off the plane at Suvarnabhumi Airport, and they came outside under the flyovers and everything. It was quite funny. And Mark and Pecco, they looked like they wanted to just get on the bus and they wanted to get to the hotel. You could see that they were not quite wrecked, but they were close to it. And of course, everyone wanted selfies. Selfies is a massive thing there as well. And every time Pecco had to have a selfie, he had to have it with someone holding on to a Marc Marquez poster that Mark had already signed. I just feel the screws are turning on Pecco every single moment he's in the slipstream of Marc Marquez's machine. That is going to all play out as we get to the early rounds. It's going to be an absolute dogfight between those two. I can't wait. I'm very excited about it for
this was something I wanted to ask you about, Keith. I mean, what are your expectations for this season? Obviously, we've seen a bit of testing so far. We haven't seen all the testing yet, but we're seeing manufacturers getting closer to the Ducati domination. We're seeing factories like Aprilia, for example, who are basically going for a completely different thing, a completely different bike. Their chassis is so different that the old engine doesn't fit in it. And obviously we've not seen much from Aprilia in terms of testing, because we've lost the world champion, we lost Jorge Martin to injury. But other factories seem to be closing the gap. Definitely Yamaha, a little bit Honda. KTM have their own struggles. Aprilia have gone completely new, completely wiped the slate. What are your expectations for this season? Are we going to see more closer battles towards the front between different manufacturers?
I'm not really sure about that. I mean, I think that the Ducati, I'm not convinced that we've seen everything from Ducati yet. I'm waiting for Buriram really to see if there's anything that's coming out of the box by the time we get there. I mean, they're quite calm the way they do their business. Delinea is usually outthought most people most of the time when it comes to what developments they've got coming. So we'll see if Ducati's got anything finally that drops out of the box when we get to Buriram. Yamaha have obviously made a step. I don't think we can call it anything else other than a fairly major step. Honda appear to have made a smaller step, but again, I have to put a little caveat about it being Sepang early in the season. Under that advantage they've got, and the other thing is staying injury free. I can't see past the animal that is Marc Marquez at the moment. He has everything now in line, everything he wanted, barring an injury, which is obviously something that, I mean, it's interesting to see that Rivola was still harping on about Michelin, and whether there's going to be a little bit of heat between those two at the moment, because Rivola and team seem to think that the tyre that upended Jorge Martin was not quite what it should have been. And that does happen sometimes at the beginning of the season. I don't know whether that's paranoia or a conspiracy theory or whatever it is, because at the start of every season, you've probably got God knows how many container loads of tyres from last year that you're quite looking to get rid of, starting of testing. They're supposed to be kept in temperature controlled environments and so on and so forth, but rubber's a funny old thing, and it only has to go off a little bit before it becomes a problem. And Rivola seems to feel that might be the case that tripped up Jorge Martin. But
well, they look back at the tyres that he was using when he crashed, and they were manufactured in July of last year, obviously, and kept in.
That's been confirmed, isn't it?
Yeah. Well,
every one of them is marked and barcoded in the light. But of course, it just depends. I mean, if it was kept at the wrong end of the bleeding container that was in the sun or something, I don't know. I'm guessing. But the fact is that to keep this stuff absolutely pristine, perfect, where you put your food in the fridge from top to bottom matters, and so on.
Get a burger out and it's frozen halfway through.
Or gone off.
Sorry, Keith.
Go on.
You were mentioning of the season in general.
This coming season, I think it's going to be. I mean, it's going to be a great season, but I don't see it being so much different than last year. I think injury again is going to play a part massively. I was impressed with Iogura. I thought Iogura as a rookie, I thought he's had a good couple of tests. I mean, Iogura was there or thereabouts, which I was quite surprised at how well he's going. But again, it's carrying it forward. It's a bloody long season, and it's going to be hard work.
I laughed a bit at Iogura's comments about when he was questioned about, we're here for 6 days testing. How do you feel about Sepang? And he just sort of went, basically, I'm bored shitless of it now. I'll be going around the track and I'm just like, nah, well.
It's really about mindset. When you go to a test, I hated testing, whatever it was back and we didn't do it anything like as intense, obviously, as they are. Go to the front of this interview, a couple of clicks on the rear, couple of clicks on the front, and you were away the lads. A bit of gearing change and some tyre pressure changes, and that was it. But nowadays they have complex issues to work their way through data-wise, and they have 10, 20, 30 people working on the data to try and feed into the electronic side of things exactly what's what. And you're going round and round, and you've got to keep yourself. You've still got to be as sharp on the last lap as you were on the first lap. Otherwise, the data that you're issuing is pointless. It doesn't work. So the kind of guy that's putting in lots of mileage and managing to keep his head around the job in hand, is interesting. Marc Marquez will ride around something that isn't perfect. Pecco Bagnaia will need it to be right. So the different personalities start to work as far as the performance is concerned. And again, this is why I say testing's a strange thing. And when they all chuck tires at it at the end for a time attack right at the last day, I always think that's like a smoke screen, because you can't be sure that everybody's putting everything into it, 100% into it, from a rider, from a performance, and so on. You can't be sure that they've laid everything on the line. I don't think they have. We're going to find that out when we get to Buriram.
We're on test, won't we? But before we move on to another one, do you think Mark will get into Pecco's head this year?
Oh, 100%. 100%. It's in everybody's head. He's annoying. He's like a little weevil that works his way through. I mean, he really is an annoying little shit, really, isn't he? At the end of the day, Marc Marquez is the consummate competitor. He will do anything to win. He's not quite the likes of, I don't know, think of some Schumacher. Schumacher was ruthless to the point of being unsporting. And there have been people that have accused Marc Marquez of not being sporting. It's a fine line that you can drop either side of. Some of the things that he did with Valentino Rossi before Valentino Rossi's head imploded.
That's the Pound 2015.
You what? Sorry.
So Pound 2015, but yeah, that was I mean,
but that was Valentino's fault. Valentino started to fire a few bullets at Marc Marquez, and Marquez is a young man that's on his way that kind of wasn't going to be pushed around, and you ended up with a situation where those two brilliant riders, two brilliant personalities, clashing like mad. The only bad side of that, of course, is with the fact that we'd all gone tribal by then on the terraces, which is a bit of a shame. You're either yellow or you're red, and I'd never seen that before, where we'd actually got fans against fans over riders. Yeah, of course you always had someone that you supported particularly, but the where it had become like a football terrace, I'm afraid that wasn't my cup of tea at all.
Almost sort of like left wing versus right wing sort of thing. But I mean, looking at Pecco, I mean, the last few years when he's sort of flopped, Jorge Martin got into his head last year. Quite thorough. There have been times where Pecco has been seemingly perfect. I mean, he won the first race of the year. I genuinely looked at Pecco at the start of last year and thought, this is his year. It's going to be a walkover. And people said Jorge wasn't mature enough and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But Pecco sort of made a few mistakes and then just went, fuck, this isn't working. And it's almost like he kind of talked himself out of it and then had to talk himself back into it. And the same sort of thing with 2021, where it's almost like Pecco looked really, really strong, then made a few mistakes, and then Fabio was like, right, cool, I'm gonna jump on this, and then did, and Pecco tried to talk himself back into it, didn't work. So I think from my opinion anyway, my perspective is that Pecco is massively influenced by his rivals' success and his mistakes. So
I wouldn't agree that he's influenced by it. I think that Pecco is an exact kind of person and kind of rider. And I think that the wheels have to be in line for him to get the best out of it. And he has made unforced errors. And I think that's the only way we can explain it, is unforced errors. And Marc Marquez is going to be working towards that. You only have to hear some of the things he says. He's very complimentary about Pecco and all the rest of it. He's the smiling assassin, the typical smiling assassin. He's winding the situation up. Pecco's in an Italian team. He's used to the bikes and all the rest of it, but now he has got a real threat on the other side of the garage. And it's going to take some management by Ducati to keep that lot cool. But they are a performance-based operation. They're only interested, when Pecco's beaten by another Ducati, the look in the factory team garage is horrendous. It looks like someone's just served them up some bloody warm plate of false pasta or something. They're not happy about it. So next year they've got the perfect situation their way. Got Pecco Bagnaia, who's a great yardstick. Marc Marquez, who's probably now the favourite for the year. And let's see what they come up with. I think that most of the focus is going to be on those two to start with. And then you got, I know that the guy on the stage in Bangkok was making a few mistakes, thinking Alex Marquez was Mark Marquez was Alex Marquez. But the fact is that we might have a Marquez that is on a Gresini bike with all the data and stuff that they've had already, and in a more relaxed team that might just be the fly in the ointment that we haven't been looking at.
I was saying to you today, I said, like, if you're a betting man, which I aren't, the 2024 bike is one of the greatest Grand Prix bikes of all time, arguably up there. It's an established bike. Everything is optimized on it. The 2025 isn't there yet, even though it's an evolution. It might not take as much tweaking as some of the other ones have. But Alex is going to get on to that. He's already fast on it. He's comfortable in the team. He hasn't got factory expectations. I mean, if you're a betting man, and this is a long shot, could he win a sprint? Could he win a race in the first couple of races?
Yeah, I think he could. And I think the other reason behind that as well, which I think many people might overlook, is the psychological effect between brothers. Your fact is, if you've got a brother like I have, you're in competition. Everything you do is, despite the fact you like each other because it's your brother, you still want to beat him all the time. So when you've got someone like Mark, who's your bloody teammate at Gresini like he was last year, that for me wasn't a positive for Alex Marquez, I don't think. I think that more was probably, not that anybody would say it, but it feels more like a negative for me. He'd have been better off with another teammate other than Mark. So now Mark's cleared off to the factory. He's got a situation where it's not about his brother, it's about Gresini beating the factory Ducatis, the 2025 factory Ducatis. So Alex Marquez could be a winner this year, yeah.
And I also think with Alex Marquez, if you look at his 2024 season on the Gresini Ducati, he was consistently in the points. There were a few races, obviously, where he didn't finish or whatever, but he was consistently, when he was finishing races, in the points. Yeah. A lot of top tens, a podium, and then a few, sort of fourth, fifth, sixth, that sort of thing. I think that just imagine it, constant pressure that Mark and Pecco are going to be putting on each other. We could see the championship standings could be really interesting sort of around the mid-season break, where, Alex Marquez, if he's free from injury and hypothetically speaking, is that we could be seeing Alex Marquez doing pretty well in the championship standings. He knows the team. He's got the experience with the team, and he is fast. And I really, really think that free from injury, he'll be fantastic this year. And I think you're absolutely right.
The big disappointment for me this year is the fact that KTM have busted the bank, because Pedro Acosta et al. I really was expecting, Pedro Acosta did a great job last year. Yeah. And I was expecting his second year, if they've managed to upgrade that bike. But I mean, like, when you're under the cosh like they are financially, well, we don't know which way that administration is going to go at the moment. But you can be bloody sure that they don't have the budget to be enhancing MotoGP bikes when the whole operation is in danger of collapse. Yeah. So, I mean, this has been rumbling on for some time. I think we broke it on OMG right ages ago, actually, when I first got a sniff of what was going on at KTM, and it was worrying back then. But then when you saw the enormity of it as we got further through the season, and now in the winter time, when I think it's strange as well. I don't think their PR people are even going to be in Buriram, for the test. So, which is really unusual, is to read that they're not going to be there for the test. I think I picked that up today earlier on. I hope I'm right with that, but it is a strange thing. I think there's a bit more to come out of the woodwork regarding KTM yet, and I think it's a great shame that we've got a talent of Acosta's, and he's on a multi-year deal as well with KTM, so he's kind of stuck with what he signed for the minute. And I don't know what the ins and outs of a KTM contract or an Acosta organised contract are, but you would hope that he's got some get out of jail free cards to be issued there somewhere if they do.
I'm sure find a ride.
Imagine if he wins a race or a sprint.
No, he'll find a ride. That's not the point, but it depends how hard he's nailed down to the KTM situation. It's
the contract. You'd think it'd be fairly watertight, but I think it expires at the end of next year.
Yeah.
So yeah. Well, he's going to have to buy his way out of his contract. But we'll have to wait and see. I mean, it's horrible because my biggest fear is that, but losing a manufacturer when we've already lost Suzuki. We're going to be creeping towards the 17, 18 bike thing again, like we were just before the CRT days. Remember that? So, but let's just hope it doesn't come to that. But yeah, moving on from that, we love a ramble, but yeah, I've got a really random one here for you, Keith. We'll obviously finish off on a few more GP ones in a bit. I've got a bit of a 3-part World Superbike question for you. As much as we've had closely fought World Superbike seasons after 2002, that was the end of the golden era with the Imola battle between Colin Edwards, obviously, and Troy Bayliss. Would you say that was the season where that was the last season where World Superbikes was bigger than MotoGP, that 2002 season, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, World Superbikes was on a real roll at that particular time. That they were bigger than MotoGP in a lot of marketplaces. No doubt in my mind about that. But again, it's the behind the scenes sort of shenanigans that goes on again, isn't it? I mean, when Dorna ended up owning both World Superbikes and MotoGP, you know that there's only one winner going to come out of that at the end. They're going to want that segment, that gap between the two series. And we don't have that. We don't really have enough races in World Superbikes, in my view. I mean, it's you do over a weekend, but not actually in different venues, different countries.
It's not really a World Championship anymore, is it? Apart from Phillip Island.
Well, that is obviously the worry, isn't it? Is that it's kind of sunk a little bit. But you only got to look again at the terraces, and there's not enough people supporting on the ground things like World Superbike. MotoGP is the big. And again, if you go back to the Asia thing Alex was talking about earlier on, in Asia, they're all about brand. They're all about the big name. It's not, and World Superbikes is not the big name in comparison with MotoGP. Your World Superbike champion is not the big name compared with Jorge Martin, Marc Marquez, and so on and so forth. So I think that branding wise, that association with the top brand, I always think of it like handbags. Why would anybody pay bloody $5,000 for an handbag when you can buy a perfectly good one as a copy down the road that's going to cost you 50 quid? I'll have a word with my wife about that in a minute. But
just good. My second part of the question is linked to what you said about names, because I've also put here, if the 2002 season, in your opinion, was the last great year of World Superbikes, if so, was Valentino? Two questions really. Was Valentino Rossi the main reason for that? Or was it equally because Foggy Harder, Keeley Edwards, Slade Corsa, Bayliss, and Yanagawa, and the strong British and Japanese wildcard era, all ended as a group? Do you think that's also one of the big factors? Because as you said, the superstars had more or less gone, some to Grand Prix. Yamaha pulled out of World Superbikes at the end of 2000, I think. Mm. Edwards was going off to Grand Prix. Bayliss went off to Grand Prix.
Harger was mucking about in Grand
Rossi
Prix.
was putting MotoGP on the, on the map.
I think you had Rossi, a young Rossi was, again, it was something that you can get hold of. This is a guy that you could really support. He was a personality, he got a great manner about him. He was fast, colourful, and all the things that you want as a promotion thing. And I know that, a lot of people in different marketplaces were panicking like hell when Rossi was going to pack it in, because that was going to kill off a crowd. I think that probably Silverstone suffered from that terribly when Rossi was no longer a rider. It is a problem, and Marc Marquez couldn't replace him when it came to that personality, that iconic, brand of Rossi. Mark's still building on that. Who else have we got? Pecco Bagnaia, fantastic guy, but you wouldn't put him as an iconic entertainer. No. It's quite funny. I was looking at some of the pictures. My wife came in the other day, and she said he's a really good looking boy, Pecco, and you don't kind of notice it. He's kind of he's just kind of there. It's not somebody that you. But if it was Rossi and he came down, he's not particularly good looking, but Valentino Rossi commands your interest, commands your attention. That's a really difficult bridge to get across. But getting back to what you say, the combination, them all rolling over. We've had it before in different categories around the world. Look at the state of America. Look at the state of Australia. It's neither two leading countries over the years in Grand Prix, not producing anything.
We've got a few Japanese riders coming up through the ranks in Moto3, Moto2, and obviously we've got a Japanese rider in MotoGP and have done for some years. But I mean, we've not been any groundbreaking Japanese riders.
It's not like the 90s where, and you'll remember, Keith, like the Sakata and whatnot, you had a Japanese contingent that would dominate 125s. There were specialists that stayed in that category before it was just used as a stepping stone to MotoGP, obviously. And I think that era might come back one day though, because you've got your Asia Talent Cup, which is brilliant. I mean, Ayagura is the first rider to be a MotoGP product of that, which I think is fantastic and really, really, really cool. And Tao Furisato as well. I'm really excited about him, Keith. I don't know if you probably heard, you followed him quite a few times.
Yeah.
I really feel like he is as good or can be better than Ayagura. There's something about how aggressive he can be in races, and I think he's a great racing name as well. But that's the
amazing name.
But I think I feel really good about him, and I think Tatsuki Suzuki.
That's a big bummer.
He's 28 now. I think that ship's probably sailed in the long run.
Yeah,
but it's looking good. But then, hypothetical one for you, Keith. Mixing your knowledge of Grand Prix and British Championship racing career and your broadcasting days, if you had to form the perfect race team around you as a rider of any era and machine, your team boss and crew chief, who, what era and bike would it be?
Jesus. That is a very intense question. Whoever sent that one in, cool. I think it would have to be going back to the M1 when the M1 ruled the world, because the Yamaha, corner speed, the way it turned in looked like a really, really cool motorbike to ride. I think it was one that was team management. Oh, the Shuhei Nakamoto times. He was a quiet behind the scenes kind of fella, but
that's the boss, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was the boss back in the day. But Davide Todozzi for me he lives it, and I like having someone that's like sparky and lively and kind of knows his stuff as well. So Davide Todozzi would be in there. Probably the M1.
Yeah.
What else was we going for there?
That was what I was saying. The era. So the era was early 2010s, isn't it? And then obviously Nakamoto-san and
Todozzi as crew chief.
Sorry, yeah. I mean, Jeremy Burgess would be probably.
I knew Jeremy Burgess when he first came in the paddock. I mean, back in the day. I mean, Jeremy Burgess went from being the bus driver to being the top bloody guru of all things. And the reason why Jerry Burgess was like that was because his personality, and this was old school, his personality was able to listen, to interpret, to understand. He wasn't like a boss. He was someone that I hated the way he was treated when he was let go by Valentino. I thought it was very poor. I think he deserved better than that. And he was one of those iconic Aussies that came across here, the jobbing Aussies and New Zealanders that used to flood Europe back in the day. They'd come over here with a pair of underpants and a bloody, and 2 shillings in their pocket. And they were Austrian shillings before the euro. And they used to turn up and they'd bloody sleep in your shed and kind of and work away at the job and learn their stuff on the go. And Burgess was one of them. I mean, fantastic guy at the end of the day, and a pioneer of being able to make things work, coming across from the 2-stroke era into the 4-stroke era. I mean, that's a big transition, and there's a lot of different disciplines in there. But I perhaps should have had Jerry Burgess in my team, because he was quite good fun too, and he had a dry old sense of humour. So
I mean, I brought up with watching him with Valentino and a bit of Mick Doohan. I remember being in the pit lane of Valencia 2013, and that was Rossi's first year back at Yamaha. I was stood next to Derek Crutchlow and photographer Cormac, and I've never been in the pit lane before, and I was just like all starstruck.
Yeah.
And I was there's Jerry Burgess, and then Derek said, no, not today. He's just lost his job for next year.
Well,
So,
I don't think the job would have bothered him as much as the way that it kind of just dribbled out.
that's what I mean. Yeah,
And Deck was right. I mean, Crutchlow. If you don't want to be Cal Crutchlow, you want to be Deck. He's dead because his dad is the coolest guy on the earth.
I was once, and that was to that Valencia. So I recognise you. He's like, "Oh, do you?" Thinking, I was like, "No, I've seen you on TV." He's like, "No, I know Cormac, the photographer." And he was like, "Oh, Cormac, yeah, I'll go with him everywhere." So yeah, and then we got on the plane with him all the way to Valencia. And he said, "Oh, we've got a hire car. Jump in with us if you want." And then it saved me a train journey. But he had some stories, and I saw a lot of him in the year after as well now and again because I used to do a blog with Pole Position Travel, so I saw a lot of Deck. Great guy, proper down to earth. I haven't seen him in a long time actually, but yeah, no, that's another story. But yeah, he's really good guy. Um, yeah, back to current times, Keith. In 2027, we witness a new era, as we touched on quite a few times. We know wings won't fully leave the sport because engineers will find ways within the parameters to integrate them into the fairings. They just will, because Pandora's box is open. To a degree, who's someone a fan of the. Sorry, I'll start again. To a degree, and someone who's a fan, how Special Grand Prix is supposed to be. Do you think this is a good thing?
Well, I think that what we're going to have is a transition, and I think the ride height adjustment that's going out of it, there's no benefit in that for motorbikes at all. And I think that we end up with a problem is that they're getting off the corners quicker, and therefore they're traveling down the straights quicker, which means the terminal velocity by the time they get to tipping into the next corner is higher than it's ever been. And I think that is a problem. You can't just keep getting faster and faster and faster and faster because the tracks then become less and less and less safe. You mentioned Brno earlier on. There are certain tracks, classic ones like Brno, that haven't got the runoff that you need nowadays. It's why we don't see Grand Prix bikes on Brands Ashos, something like that, which is a great shame because they'd be brilliant around there. But what will end up with this? There'll still be aero of a lesser kind, and it will be more restricted. But what you got to remember is when you've got, for instance, when you leave, it all sits down, and then when you're actually in the race, you get the thing sitting down coming out the corner, and it adjusts the angle of attack of the aero as well. So the ride height adjuster is also adjusting the angle of attack, and so therefore the overall aero of the motorbike when you're down the straight. So by having the ride height adjuster sit down, you're taking the angle of attack off of it, which means top end wise, you've got a few K more top end wise as well. So there are nuances within that whole package as a unit that are making a massive difference. So taking away the ride height stuff is a good thing. Aero, you said, I mean, I think there was even a little bit of aero back in my day. If you looked around, there were things like on the handlebars that on the fairing used to have a little bit of wingage on it, if you like. So I think that's going to go. But what is going to be sneaking out on the horizon that we haven't yet seen? That's you've got ground effects aero that has been developed at great cost. We are actually having ground effect aero on a motorbike when it's tipped in. The shape of the underbelly of the fairing and everything is pulling the bike into the track in an area that I don't want to see any of that. We need the tire to be the piece that's giving us the grip rather than aero giving us grip mid corner or the like as well. Because once we go down that, you mentioned rabbit holes earlier on, that's got to be the biggest one of the lot, I'd have thought. And there are some very, very special aerodynamicists out there that I'm sure that are working on stuff like that at huge cost. And then we run into that problem that we talked about earlier on, the KTM problem, the Suzuki problem. Suzuki did brilliantly. I mean, like they basically had signed a new deal with Dorna for a long term. I think it's 4 or 5 years. As soon as the board worked out where they were headed and their model range and the future, they jumped off that ship. I don't know how much it would have cost them to actually break that contract, but you can be fairly sure it cost them. But what great timing for Suzuki. They saved themselves a fortune.
Yeah.
And to be honest, their model range was pretty low key at that point. I mean, they didn't really have anything to promote through MotoGP, in my view. There was nothing that interesting in the Suzuki model range that MotoGP would have enhanced their sales over. Again, in my view. Mind you, you could argue that across all of MotoGP, and whether superbikes the sales of top end superbikes nowadays are so low in comparison with the, like what do we call them? The Paris Dakar type things. These
well, your adventure bikes. I mean, obviously that's our customers that come in every day. Most of them have GSs or Tigers or Africa Twins. The sports bike customer in the UK, well, in the world, that you could argue it's a declining market.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for me personally, I've always said the 600 is the perfect bike, or the super sport bike is the perfect bike for on the road. The Triumph 675, 765s, whatever they are now, perfect bikes for on the road. Once you start getting into the liter, series, it all gets a bit silly.
It's a bit daft for the road these days, I think, honestly. And
and then you got your potholes.
Yeah, yeah, British roads. The bikes on the road these days don't need to be. They don't need to resemble what we see in MotoGP, do they? Yeah. Two wheels can mean, oh, yeah, that's cool. That was a good race. I fancy a bike. Go and buy a cafe racer. It doesn't need to be sports bike. But you can. I mean, talking about going over the top in tech and whatnot. Some of the world superbikes have more. I think some of their tech is more advanced than MotoGP anyway, because we're on a spec ECU. If you see the front wing of the M1000R of Top Racks, it's ridiculous. So yeah, they're going to have to backtrack that anyway, aren't they? To 2027, regardless, as you were saying, that they're going to have to dumb that down. So, but yeah, which I don't have a problem with, honestly. They're supposed to be tuned sports bikes with the mirrors and indicators taken off anyway, with slicks, and away you go. But
the thing they're going to have to think about as well, obviously, is when we move into the 850 era in 2027. Our World Superbike's going to have to look at changing their specifications as well to basically make sure that they're not quicker than MotoGP bikes.
BSB maybe as well to a degree, but then they don't go to the same tracks anyway. So but Keith, was it towards the end of your racing career that you knew that you wanted to get involved in broadcasting, or did it just happen by accident around at retirement time, or just?
I was doing it already, really, with different companies. When you'd fill in between races with stuff with Chris Carter, who was the commentator then, Murray Walker occasionally. Murray gave me my first ever job reference for broadcasting. It was it's like this scribbled note to whom it may concern kind of thing. And there were kind of days where you could just wander in the commentary box when you felt like it and go and give everybody your 10 penneth. But the first series that I did anything with was a series on Anglia television called Wheels. They had a series that used to come out from the far east of England, and it was a great series on Anglia Telly up this way, up where I live, and it was just a natural extension. The thing is, it was all about getting your sponsors' names mentioned. It was all about promotion, and this is where the great mentor was Barry Sheen, obviously, because Barry, in a conversation, he could work out how to get his sponsor's name in the conversation where they couldn't edit it out. It was impossible to edit it out. So it would have to go out if it wasn't a live conversation. He would always make sure. And I learned this off of him. And back in the day, there weren't that many people, unlike now, where every motorbike racer has got some PR savvy now. They've pretty much got it all switched on there. From 14, 15 years old, these kids speak like 30-year-olds in the way that they're so professional. Well, back in the day, our lot, one of the classic events for me was at the Brands Hatch Radio 1 Free Day. And it was a DJ back then called Dave Lee Travis, who was a big name in Radio 1. You'll have to look him up because it's a long time ago. And I won the 350 race, and a fella called Gary Lingham won the 250 race. Can't even remember who won the 500 race. We were clubmen then. And Gary Lingham was he of the rather long, should we say, discretionary period of Her Majesty's government for a while after certain imports were made. Look it up as well. There's a story about good old Gary. Good lad he was. Anyway, he was invited up onto the stage. And this is why I always say my colleagues couldn't speak really publicly very well in those days. And Dave Lee Travis said to him, "Is there anything that you would like to say to the crowd, Gary?" And Gary went, "Whoa, whoa." Well, if there's any girls out there, it was toe-curlingly bad. Bearing in mind this was a Radio 1 broadcast. Oh, mate, we laugh, and he still hates me for it even now. I don't speak to Gary very often. I've kind of lost track, but he was a good-looking lad, rode a motorbike really well, but got himself into a lot of trouble with the import-export business. And I haven't seen him for years and years and years and years. But the reason why I always put down the reason why I was reasonably successful in broadcasting because there was no one else. So I was quite fortunate at that time.
Yeah, it definitely helps to have a load of people around you that don't really know what they're doing.
Or saying.
Or saying, yeah, absolutely.
A lot of the best commentators that I feel have been because it was almost an accident. Well, it just happened naturally, and yeah, okay. You said there was no one else around there. I'm sure you know being maybe slightly modest there, Keith, but
No, it's not. I'm not notably modest.
I mean, I don't know anyone. I mean, you've got that quite. You've got when you know when you get really excited. I always remember that time. It's well, there was other times before, but you know, in 2015 at Assen, and Mark goes for the inside of Valentino at the chicane. I think, and you really, well, I wouldn't say lost it, but you got so excited, and I thought that is, you know, that's how you know, if I was to be a commentator one day, that's how I would love to be. He goes for the inside. I can hardly believe that. I remember that line. I thought, oh, brilliant, excellent.
Well, I mean, yeah, the thing is, sport is passion. Passion is sport at the end of the day. And so when you can usually tell when someone's over trying, both when they're riding or when they're commentating. It's fairly easy. And when they're, yeah, I hate commentary that is vanilla. I hate commentary that doesn't have a controversial. If there's something controversial you're looking at, if there's something controversial that's happened, everyone sat on their settee at home either knows about it or wants to know about it, and not giving it to them and not discussing it seems a bloody sin to me. It really does. But you know, and also Julian and I worked on the basis that, and he was usually more right than me. I mean, if he was right, then he could get stuck into me or call me to task if I hadn't got something quite right, and vice versa. And I think honest commentary is about that. I think the old school way of doing it, and moreover now, I think we've gone back to the old days where you're not really supposed to criticize or to give your bloody co-commentator a bit of a poke. And I think we've lost something there. I think that contradiction only matches what people are thinking sat on their sofas at home. Hang on a second, that ain't right. And it's almost like you're not being stood up for in that arena. And I kind of miss that a little bit. I quite like an argument, I think, is my way around this. And Jules and I used to love it, and still do, by the way.
And for me, you know, when you're watching a race and somebody does something really stupid, you know, someone dive bombs someone, it doesn't pay off, and they take them out, you know, it's the commentary is always very sort of like, oh dear, that shouldn't have happened, sort of thing. Where it should be, what a muppet! I can't believe he's just done that, and you never get any of that sort of thing now.
Well, I mean, but what you got to bear in mind is the production teams nowadays behind the sport are not what they used to be. You know, I was talking about the gold standard of Martin Turner. He won a BAFTA for his rugby coverage. The guy was top end, and we were lucky enough to have him producing motorbike races. And so therefore you were encouraged in certain areas that you were good at, and you were discouraged from doing things you weren't particularly good at. And if he didn't think it was relevant, or if he didn't think it was right to be the way you were being, then mate, a ton of bricks would fall down on you. Martin Turner for me is a hero of modern day, you know, sports production.
What do you do now?
He's retired. He's retired. He's got Parkies, but he's got him and Dave Clark from Sky as well, who was the darts presenter, and Martin from behind the scenes. Both of those guys highly respected within our industry. Both got Parkies. I saw Martin a couple of weeks ago. I was down at his house having some dinner. Gate crashed him and his wife's place down in Oxted in Surrey. And he's doing very well, very well. He's now a consultant, so therefore he doesn't work the lunatic hours that he would work in the past. But he's still consulting on different sports and behind the scenes production for television. But back in the day, yeah, he was the man responsible for the style of things that we all sort of look back on and say they were great times. And that was working out the back of a transit van for Sky Television back in the day. I mean, it was, facilities wise, everything has gone forward, 100-fold since then. But the producer and the production that you get nowadays is, like I say, it's a bit more vanilla. It's not as cutting edge. And the reason for that is a lot of these corporates that you now are working for, BT particularly, they are a corporate. There are boxes to be ticked. Your inclusive and diversification, your unconscious bias, your words you use, things you allude to, jokes you make. They're all regulated by the big company. It's like Big Brother is looking in, which obviously, in the end, I didn't suit them. They didn't suit me. We went the way we went. And it kind of was an odd time for me, but I'm looking back and I'm thinking, God, I stepped off at the right time, because sometimes I listen to commentary and I think, do you know what? Why didn't you just have an argument? Why didn't you actually get on with it and just
Jimmy and I do this all the time. We'll be watching a race and we'll be sort of commentating along with it, because the commentary that we get, not to really criticize anybody, because of obviously what you're saying, Keith, is that it's a lot of the production in it is, but when we're sort of commentating together, not deliberately, we're just sort of giving a running commentary about
our girlfriends tell us off, like, there is commentary, guys, and we're like, yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah, but the stuff that we say is like, we'll sort of look at each other like, good job we're not in that commentary box, because bloody hell we get cancelled quickly, and it's never anything terrible.
No,
it's just we'd say stuff that would be like, God, that Yamaha's a piece of shit, isn't it? And you can't.
I mean, there used to be a situation at BT at the end of every year. You would have a compliance meeting.
Yeah.
I mean, they had compliance. They had people that were watching and listening to whatever was being said. And it's not that I'm paranoid, but I think somebody actually was specifically listening to my one-track commentary sometimes, because I'd get an email to say, you said this or you said that or whatever it was. It was just undermining all the time. It was just like chipping away at your personality. Which was really difficult for me back in the day. And to be fair, I mean, they've produced, a good television show everybody loves. But I think people get used to certain scenarios and they don't miss it until they've heard it back sometimes. You listen to some old commentaries and it's terrible and you thought it was good. And you listen to some old commentaries and you think, Christ, why can't it be like that still? I think that I stood in for Jack Bernicle at British Superbikes when Jack got sick. He had a terrible throat on him, and I did the final 3 rounds of BSB a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And it got quite good accolades at the time. But I think the reason was James and Jack had worked together for so long. They'd become an old couple,
Right.
where there was sort of this jokey teammates. And it kind of had moved a little bit away from the actual action to some extent. It was almost like the Morecambe and Wise show. If I go back far enough, you guys don't go back that far, so I'll have to think of another pairing. But it was a situation. And then I came in, and of course, shattered the earth with screaming and shouting and jumping all over the bloody box. And James picked his game up and was straight on it as well. And all of a sudden, we got a completely different style of commentary. And then Steve Day moved in for the next year. Steve Day came in and took over from Jack, if you remember.
Yeah, I mean, Jack Bernicle, great commentary voice.
He's great. I mean, Jack Bernicle is an absolute superstar. I mean, he's such good fun. You go out with Jack he's old school, good fun, up on the table, singing and bloody dancing, and Jack is a great guy. But I think that what happened again, and this again is a criticism of production, not so much of the team. It's just that they were just being allowed to do their thing. There was no real producer behind that was saying, well, perhaps you should do a bit more of this and a bit less of that. Perhaps you should, your intonation, maybe you should do this a bit more. Don't argue quite so much. Don't talk over each other quite so much. Whatever it is, all that stuff comes from a team that are listening to you and expecting certain quality of work and coverage. Martin Turner used to challenge me to where the next pass was coming from. And luckily, back in the day, I was on the ball enough to be able to work it out fairly easily. And of course, if I got it, I'd get an extra pint that night. Good Good old days, as we said earlier.
Yeah, I mean, we hear it all the time, obviously, with the commentary that we get at the moment. Say, for example, Lewis Sotheby, Matt Burt, for the official MotoGP commentary. They're very, very good, but every now and again they'll trip over each other and like, oh, well,
Yeah, but they work for Dorna.
yeah,
World Feed. World Feed is nightmare commentary because you've got to be everything to everybody, every country. You can't be seen to be taken. But back in the day when I shouted, oh, screaming my head off, and dissing bloody Scott Russell, that just ain't allowed now. You can't go there like that anymore. Even though Scott Russell, the first time I met Scott Russell, he's the coolest dude in the world. I thought he was going to punch me lights out, but in the end, he just hi Keith. He was dead cool. But you can't do what we did. That's just not allowed anymore.
So, but yeah, I mean, obviously, Matt Burt, it has to be so generic. He told me once, face to face, when Dorna had to take over through practice 1 and 2, I think, in Portimao 2023, and he got slaughtered on Twitter for being too like, who's this guy? I never heard of him. He's generic as hell. And I was like, translate. Listen, he's been in the paddock since 1996. Back off. He knows what he's talking about. But this man,
it could have been worse.
More generic. They have to.
Could have been worse. You could have got Matt Oxley in there. Matt knows. Matt's brilliant. Matt knows everything. He's one of my favourite journalists. Like I said, unless you get on his politics, but he's one of my very favourite motorcycle journalists. But he has got a voice for written work. He really has. Commentary. You couldn't get it out of him fast enough.
Yeah. After you retired, did you ever look? Well, I mean, after you retired, did you think back at other races, previous years when you were still racing? Think, I wish I had that bike, and I was working under him because I'd have done better than him.
Nah, I mean, I think that there are times when I finished 6th in the World Championship when I only did half the races on a 350. There are so many different nuances to careers as they move through. The fact of the matter was, back in the day, you had to ride what you could make money from. I came from what I like to think of as a normal working class family that didn't have the kind of money to go racing motorbikes. So everything I did, I had to make the money to be able to go racing motorbikes to put it together. So when my career came good riding 350s, to move up into 500s, I had to basically sell a 350. That's how it was. You moved on up. And the only reason I went up to 500s, really, the bikes were shit in comparison. They weren't anything like as nice. But the fact was, you only earned money up there. You didn't earn any money riding the little bikes. There was a couple of series that made a few quid in the UK, but mostly, if you didn't ride the big bikes, then you weren't going to make any money. But the big bikes, there weren't the opportunities to go into factory teams. I went to Suzuki and rode for Suzuki as a factory rider, but it was the year-old bikes on Dunlops, not on the Michelins that the bikes were basically designed around, and all the data was around. And it just was a disaster all the way through. And I think, it's probably to a lesser extent, it's the same now. People have to go to Spain. People have to ride for other teams. I mean, Michael Laverty, talk about put your money where your mouth is. Michael Laverty is doing a great job. Now, there is a man who should be Sir Michael Laverty. I don't know what his politics are or whether he would even fancy that. Oh, hello. We fell off.
So, unfortunately, we lost Keith Huewen there. Really, really, really annoying. It was a problem at our end, actually. It was mildly unprofessional of us, as
our fault.
As is our want.
We're going to have a tech fault eventually. Well, I said tech fault.
And it happened to be during one of the most important interviews of our podcasting history so far. But anyway, thank you so much to Keith for joining us. That was a fantastic interview. Really, really great.
And that was the last question anyway, really. It was the last
we were
question.
pretty much there. And the thing is, we did have one more question, but we've pretty much covered it already.
It was about the predictions of this year. And we were touched on that, especially with MotoGP and Pecco and Mark leading the way and whatnot. We'd already got there.
Yeah.
So a big thank you to Keith. And he's a good sport as well. He's got time for us. But it's a lot of time now. It wasn't an awful long time for us to be with us, so really good. And Keith, obviously, his insights are fantastic. We love it when people just want to tell us a story as well, because we just want to listen. It's brilliant. It's a privilege to have you on, Keith. So thank you so much.
Yeah.
And hopefully we'll get to it again, where you can say goodbye as well. So
yeah, hopefully. I mean,
sorry about that.
very, very annoying. But anyway, so obviously we've had a bit of a rough start to the year with not really having weekly episodes so much. We are going to be continuing on with weekly episodes now from now on. We're going to be, like I said at the beginning of this episode, we will be having a Bruno sort of pre-Punter's perspective episode. Obviously we've got the end of testing as well, so we've got Buriram coming up, which is the last test before the season opener. And then we've obviously got the first race weekend. So we've got a hell of a lot of stuff coming up in the next few weeks that's going to be very important for us to cover. We have just seen that we've had the final test for Moto3, which happened at Portimao, and very exciting news for us Brits especially, is seeing that Scott Ogden, who is obviously on the KTM this year rather than the Honda that we're so used to seeing him on, he is fourth in the final standings for the Portimao test for Moto3.
But that, is it multiple day, that one? Off the top of my head, or is it just one? Anyway, well, look, today, final by the end of the day, testing fourth, so which is impressive regardless.
Yeah, and he's up there with the likes of Piqueras and Rueda as well. So it's definitely going to be. I'm really, really hoping that Scott is going to be a force to be reckoned with on the CIP Green Power KTM. So wish him all the best. Obviously, he's been on this show before. He's been on our podcast before. So fingers crossed. All the best to Scott, and hopefully we're going to have a very, very exciting season opener in just a couple of weeks' time.
It's before we know it. I mean, it's going to be less than a month now. So I can't wait for that. And obviously, we were just before we lost Keith. We were talking about Michael Laverty, Scott's old boss, and Keith was mentioning about a knighthood. Let's just hope that his team can keep going from strength to strength, because obviously losing Scott Ogden is quite hard. We'll obviously see how that unfolds, especially when they've got a few more days to test. They've got a Jerez test. I think they've got a Jerez test. So we'll see how his team develop. Let's just hope they can maintain some speed and improve without Scott, because losing Scott Ogden, that team, I was a bit worried for them, honestly.
And Eddie O'Shea, of course, has got a little bit of Moto3 experience for the tail end of the 2024 season. We saw Eddie O'Shea a handful of times, albeit not with any great results. We weren't really expecting that. But hopefully we'll be seeing a lot more from Eddie O'Shea. Fantastic. So we will speak to you all again very, very soon. We will have an episode out next week, hopefully early next week. And
we'll see after Buriram test. And by the way, folks, I keep thinking, does it look like I'm just ignoring this interview? I'm not. I'm looking at the notes and looking at the questions, by the way. So in case anyone thought, what's he doing? But yeah, I'm not.
He's just texting his other mistress.
Of course, don't say that.
No.
But yes, so next week, as I said, back to normal. So and there'll be post Buriram test. Unfortunately, no Jorge Martin. But I still think we'll have a better idea of the true order of this year. We'll have to wait to see. But yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much for watching and listening in, and we will see you again next week.
Thanks again. Cheers.
Ta-ra. Me too, and charge these up again. So next one. Eggs. They need women.